Tonight on NewsCenter, Korea and Tokyo are set to hold working-level talks on the sex slavery issue in Seoul. It'll be the 10th of its kind, but the first since the rare summit between President Park and Japanese Prime Minister Abe. President Park Geun-hye voices her opinion regarding the nation's reintroduction of state-authored history textbooks. This and the economy were the main topics discussed during today's cabinet meeting. And a $3.5 billion airport on Korea's resort island of Jeju is in the works to handle a spike in visitors, most of them Chinese tourists. It's Tuesday, November 10th, 2015. Hello and a very good evening to you. I'm Moon Conn-young. Korea and Japan will once again meet to resolve their differences over Tokyo's wartime system of sex slavery. The Seoul government announced today that the working-level talks will be held here in the Korean capital on Wednesday. It's the 10th of its kind, but it comes just days after the first summit talks between the leaders of the two countries, where one of the major agreements was to speed up the process and resolve this decades-old issue at an early date. Arirang News Foreign Affairs correspondent Song Ji-sun has our top story.
Korea and Japan are honoring their commitment to resolve their differences on the sex slavery issue. Korea's foreign ministry announced Tuesday that its Northeast Asian Affairs Bureau Chief Lee Sang-deok will meet his Japanese counterpart Ishigane Kimihiro in Seoul on Wednesday. These are the first talks between the two countries since their summit a week ago and follow a cabinet meeting on Tuesday where President Park Geun-hye reiterated her call for a prompt resolution of the issue.
The Korean government remains firm on its position. The wartime sex slavery issue must be addressed as soon as possible, as agreed at the summit. Tokyo needs to promptly come up with a resolution that Seoul can accept.
The key for the two officials will to narrow their differences enough so they can reach an agreement on the matter by the end of the year. However, the prospects for the talks seem somewhat murky. Speaking at a lower house session of parliament on Tuesday, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe reiterated his stance that Japan's legal obligation was settled in a 1965 agreement that normalized relations between the two countries, adding that the two should work together so that the issue doesn't come up again for future generations. Watchers say the remarks seem to indicate that Japan could offer victims financial aid instead of the formal apology and compensation that Korea demands.
The ultimate hurdle for the possible settlement of the issue is the Japanese government's admission, acceptance of legal and political responsibility for the victims. So no matter how much and what kind of humanitarian and non-political and financial and non-financial assistance the Japanese government may propose to the Korean side, that wouldn't cut the deal.
Clock is ticking for the few remaining survivors. Roughly 200,000 women, most of whom were Korean, were forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during and before World War II, but only 47 are still alive today. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye's belief on the importance of reintroducing state-authored history textbooks and economy-related bills held up in Parliament were among those discussed during a cabinet meeting earlier this Tuesday. What was discussed, what was emphasized, and what was called for? Our presidential office correspondent Hwang Sung-hee reports.
President Park says that the current history textbooks are giving students the wrong values.
잘못되고 균형 잃은 역사 교과서로 배운 학생들은 대한민국은 태어나서는 안 되는 부끄러운 나라로 인식하게 되어 나라에 대한 자부심을 잃을 수밖에 없습니다.
The government is planning to issue new state-authorized history textbooks for secondary school students starting in 2017 to eliminate what it says is left-leaning content in the existing books. Those who oppose the move call it an attempt to beautify both pro-Japan activities during the colonial era and South Korea's past military dictatorships. At a cabinet meeting Tuesday, President Park said the existing textbooks minimize North Korean provocations and blamed the South for the division of the Korean peninsula. The Korean War broke out in 1950 after North Korean troops invaded South Korea. President Park also called on lawmakers to pass a handful of livelihood bills.
매일 민생을 외치고 국민들을 위한다고 하지만 정치적 쟁점과 유불리에 따라 모든 민생 법안들이 묶여 있는 것은 국민과 민생이 보이지 않는다는 방증이 될 것입니다.
The list of bills up for consideration includes a set of free trade agreements that Korea signed with trade partners, including China, as well as bills related to labor reform and economic revitalization.
President Park also asked her cabinet ministers to thoroughly prepare for an upcoming series of multilateral summits. She said the G20, APEC, and ASEAN Plus 3 meetings will be an opportunity for Korea to explain its policies to the international community and contribute in tackling global challenges. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Now, at this hour over the National Assembly, lawmakers are racing to redraw the country's electoral map in hopes of reaching a compromise within this week. For more, we have our National Assembly correspondent Kim Myung-gil on the line. Myung-gil.
Good evening, Conn-young. Even after weeks of marathon talks, rival parties are still debating over how to rezone the number of electoral districts ahead of April's general election. It's unknown if we'll get any results tonight, but bipartisan efforts are continuing as the rival parties try to get over their differences on how to maintain the 300-seat legislature. Earlier in the day, members of the Parliamentary Political Reform Committee were hoping to reach an agreement on the number of districts, but the talks broke down. Rival parties are facing a self-imposed Friday deadline, as the National Election Commission failed to submit a decision to the National Assembly last month.
Myung-gil, what is at the heart of this dispute? Why is it so hard to reach middle ground on this matter?
Well, Conn-young, the issue centers on whether to raise the number of assembly seats for next year's general election. Both parties have been tentative about openly supporting a bigger assembly because of public disapproval. The ruling Center Party has been against increasing the number of assembly seats and has instead supported raising the number of constituencies and lowering the number of proportional representatives. The party believes that by reducing proportional representatives, it can make room for more rural constituencies without increasing the number of seats at the National Assembly. However, the main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, is not siding with the plan, saying it will stoke regionalism in Korean politics. Conn-young?
Well, it seems that efforts are being made by both parties. If no significant agreement is drawn tonight, the leaders are expected to meet again tomorrow morning, Wednesday that is, to at least find middle ground there. Thank you, Myung-gil. That was our parliamentary correspondent Kim Myung-gil reporting from the National Assembly. The Bank of Korea will hold its monthly monetary policy meeting later this week. Expectations are running high that the central bank will keep the key rate steady at 1.5% for the fifth straight month. Our Hwang Ji-hye looks into what's behind this forecast.
Korea's benchmark Kospi joined a global sell-off on Tuesday as investors pondered a possible rate hike from the U.S. Federal Reserve next month. Shares were down nearly 1.5%, closing at 1,996.59. It's the first time in about a month period that the index dipped below the 2,000 mark. But many don't expect panic in the global financial market down the road, even if the Fed actually does raise its interest rate.
The pace of the rate hike would be gradual, more so than any other of the Fed's past hikes. So it's unlikely that a rate rise in December will take a drastic toll on the global economy.
Still, given the temporary shock that the Fed's decision is expected to have on the local financial market, experts say that the Bank of Korea will not cut its key rate any further, at least through the end of the year. The central bank slashed the interest rate 4 times in just over a year to a record low 1.5%, riding on the government's drive to prop up the ailing economy.
The Fed's rate rise will prompt capital outflows from Korea, which will cause more uncertainty in the local market, where shares of the export-driven economy are already suffering from sluggish global demand.
Korea is also showing signs of picking up pace thanks to improving domestic demand, giving the central bank extra time to gauge the impact of its previous cuts. The economy grew 1.2% in the third quarter from the previous one, beating market forecasts and posting the strongest quarterly growth since 2010. Hwang Ji, Arirang News.
More countries, including Korea, are looking to benefit from the so-called mega FTAs, and that, according to experts from all around the world, is because these aren't just about reducing tariffs between trading partners, but it's a new global trade paradigm. Our Kwon So-hwa takes an in-depth look.
The recently concluded 12-nation TPP, the proposed TTIP between the EU and the US, and the RCEP involving ASEAN member states and 6 others. None of these trade deals are in effect yet, but they are part of the changing paradigm in the global trading environment. They are known as mega FTAs. On Tuesday, the necessity of mega trade pacts was stressed at the 2015 Seoul Conference on Trade and Industry, and it all hinged on economic changes the world is facing today.
As global economic growth remains stubbornly sluggish due to the weak recovery in advanced countries and the slow growth in emerging economies, voices of concern have been rising that the global economy might be entering into an age of new mediocre.
Korea, busy preparing to enter the Trans-Pacific Partnership, is a good example. The country posted a trade value of more than $1 trillion for 4 consecutive years since 2011. But this year, chances of reaching the annual target are close to 0.
The biggest downside of mega FTAs doesn't really affect the participating countries, but hits those who are left out of the deal. As for these, the mega trade pacts promote discrimination on a greater scale than with smaller FTAs involving just 2 or 3 countries.
Those with the biggest concerns are developing countries.
Even the very rich lost the political and financial capital to give out to development or development of developing countries. They seem to also have lost the moral capital to even think about developing countries.
But as some experts point out, mega FTAs are open to everyone, and trade barriers could disappear completely.
The TPP is going to get rid of a couple of them with a phase-in of 25 or 30 years, however. So they're going very, very slowly on some of the more sensitive ones, but they will go to 0.
In other words, decades from now, experts say the landscape could shift from mega FTAs to a single global FTA. Kwon So-hwa, Arirang News.
Korea's working-age population is expected to head downhill starting 2017. Now, this coupled with the fact that this nation boasts one of the world's lowest birth rates is raising red flags, leading some to suggest that perhaps Korea should start opening its doors to migrants and refugees, this as a way to take care of the demographic crunch. Arirang News' Kim Min-ji joins me live in the studio to discuss the implications of such a move. Min-ji, so give us the figures. How big is Korea's workforce at this point?
Good evening, Kan-young. Right now, there are about 37 million that are the working population in Korea, and that figure is expected to peak next year and then decline thereafter. Now, in 4 years' time, the pace of decline will quicken, and that's when the first of the baby boomer generation is set to retire and join the country's senior population. Now, to brace for this big shift, experts are saying the country should begin relying more on foreign workers. But Korea is only partially open to this idea. Korea has been relatively inactive in terms of taking in migrants. The nation's ratio of migrants to total population was just over 0.1% in 2013, far below the OECD average of 0.6%. Out of 22 member countries surveyed, it placed 20th.
The situation isn't much different when it comes to refugees, with less than 5% of those that apply granted refugee status.
At the end of August, there were more than 12,000 refugees in Korea. Most of them find work in factories.
Many of those who enter have a hard time finding solid work, as even if they have qualifications, they're not recognized in Korea.
I'm not afraid to work in any kind of hard job, but I want it must be good benefit. So that benefit, I know he wanted to sacrifice, maybe time, maybe energy.
In addition, not all who arrive have the right visas, nor are they granted refugee status right away, so many end up finding part-time work. For Korea, experts say that's a loss as the country faces a declining working age population down the road. They point out the policy should be eased to support more migrants and refugees every year.
A decline in the working age population not only means a shortage in labor but also consumption size. This means Korea's potential GDP growth rate will decline. Migrants and refugees coming to the country will not only work but will also spend, which in turn can lead to job creation.
Concerns linger, however, that an influx of migrants could raise negative sentiment at a time when youth unemployment is high. It's a double-edged sword, but experts say Korea needs to take interest in the matter and take a more open approach.
Now, Min-ji, it seems that Korea is in the risk of its economic growth really heading downhill in the next few years. If we look to the case of the European Union, they have been taking in many migrants, and that's because of the expected substantial benefits.
That's right. The EU has accepted over 800,000 refugees just this year alone. And an EU report analyzing the effects says Germany, which has accepted the most migrants this year, is expected to see its GDP rise 0.2% and 0.4% by next year and 0.7% in year 2020. Now, that's taken into consideration a plan that Germany accepts 700,000 migrants this year and 530,000 next year and about 250 the year after.
So it's something that Korea could definitely learn from and join the ranks of these more open economies, but it's not something that could happen overnight.
That's right, because it doesn't end with the migrants just coming in. The migrants and refugees need time to settle and mix with the local population. So experts say it's not something that just needs research and studies now. It's something that government action should be taken right away before it's too late.
Right, so an example or a solution that Korea could look to, but of course there needs to be more preparations done on the government level in order for Korea to accommodate this kind of migrants.
Right.
All right, Min-ji, thank you so much for that report.
Thank you.
A second international airport on Korea's southern resort island of Jeju. If all goes as planned, the $3.5 billion runway will be up and running by 2025. Our Kim Ji-yeon has the details.
Korea's southern island of Jeju is a popular vacation destination for many, particularly among Chinese tourists visiting the country. To better handle the increasing number of visitors, the island will get a new airport by 2025 in the southern city of Seogwipo Shinsan area. The new airport is an hour-long car ride from the Jeju International Airport, located on the island's northern shore. And as the only airport operating in the island now, it hosted over 23 million people last year. Plans for the new airport show that it will operate with one runway on a 3,200-meter plot of land and is projected to serve up to 25 million travelers a year. The Transport Ministry estimates the project will cost around $3.5 billion, which it says is less than what it would cost to expand the island's existing airport, and it's better for the environment. The ministry also believes the local economy will benefit since more Chinese tourists are expected to visit with the new airport, projecting visitor numbers to double and reach 39.4 million by 2025. In April, the Jeju municipal government forecast the island to see its GDP increase by $1.8 billion, 7 years after a new airport opens. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Well, many of the world's economies are lowering their corporate tax rates, and that is not leaving local businesses here in Korea too happy because corporate tax to GDP ratio is one of the world's highest here in Korea. Local businesses are increasingly calling for tax relief. Shin Se-min reports.
Korea's corporate tax to GDP ratio is one of the highest among OECD countries, which is why local firms have argued their payment burdens need to be reduced. According to an OECD report, the figure for Korea stands at 3.4% as of 2013, down 0.3 percentage points from the year before. That puts it in sixth place among the OECD's 32 member nations, in a tie with the Czech Republic and Israel. Norway topped the list with 8.5%, followed by Australia and Luxembourg. Many of the world's leading economies have been lowering their corporate tax rates in a bid to strengthen the competitiveness of local companies. Global accounting firm Deloitte says that 36 of the world's 143 countries have lowered their corporate income tax rates in the last 5 years. Ireland is planning to introduce a policy that lowers the rate for R&D companies to 6.25%, far lower than the global average of just over 23%. In Japan, the Abe administration has vowed to lower the effective corporate tax rate to the 20% range from the current rate of just over 35%. And in the U.S., companies that bring their overseas production facilities back home already qualify for lower rates. Given the global trend, local economic think tanks have increased demand for lower corporate tax rates in Korea. Currently, Korea's corporate tax rate stands at just over 24%. But the country's main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy party says lowering corporate tax rates in the past has only weakened the country's tax revenue base, forcing the government to issue more bonds. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Alarming news. Britain's weather agency says the world has warmed up 1 degree Celsius since pre-industrial times. Scientists say that means average global temperatures are just 1 degree away from a threshold where the impacts of climate change can get a whole lot worse. The figures come as world leaders prepare for a major UN summit on climate change in Paris in December. Son Jung-in has more.
The world's climate is about to enter uncharted territory. According to Britain's Met Office, this year is poised to be the first time global average temperatures will surpass the milestone of 1 degree Celsius above pre-industrial levels. It said global temperatures in the January to September period were already 1.02 degrees Celsius above the average temperatures between 1850 and 1900, or prior to industrialization, when humans started burning fossil fuels on a large scale. The 1 degree rise is psychologically important as it puts the Earth halfway towards the 2 degrees Celsius limit that scientists set to avoid the worst effects of global warming, such as floods, droughts, and rising sea levels. Topping off the grim news, the World Meteorological Organization said that 2016 would be the first year in which the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is over 400 parts per million on average. The World Bank warned that without the right policies to combat the impacts of climate change, an additional 100 million people will be driven into extreme poverty by 2030, disrupting agriculture and fueling the spread of malaria and other diseases. The findings were released ahead of a major UN summit on climate change that starts in under 3 weeks in Paris. World leaders will meet in the hope of reaching a new deal on slashing greenhouse gas emissions to combat global warming. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Myanmar's opposition party is claiming a major election victory in what could be the end of decades of military rule. Bruce Harrison joins me in the studio. Bruce, do we have a done deal?
The official vote count's not in, Conn-young, but the ruling party has conceded defeat to Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy, so definitely appears to be a win for the opposition.
So how much power do we expect the opposition to seize?
Well, based on preliminary tallies, the NLD says it's going to win more than 2/3 of contested seats. So this is a major grab for democracy for Champion Suu Kyi, something she's been fighting for a long time. And a win would mark Myanmar's first democratically elected government since the early 1960s.
I came here because I love Aung San Suu Kyi. She is the best person for all the people.
Analysts still predict a period of uncertainty because it's unclear how Suu Kyi will share power with army generals. South Korea's foreign ministry said it looks forward to boosting ties with Myanmar after the election. Air pollution has soared off the charts in China, and authorities warn thick smog choking a large area of northeastern China could hang around until this weekend. In Shenyang, measurements used to record air pollution reached over 1,000 earlier this week. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency considers levels above 300 to be hazardous. CNN reports the buildup began last weekend as cities began burning coal to keep warm. The news agency quoted an official who said coal's the major heat generator and increases air pollution. Xinhua News said farmers also contributed to the haze by burning straw after the autumn harvest. Heavy haze hung over central Liaoning province today. Officials there reportedly said visibility in some places would be as low as 500 meters.
Bruce, I don't know whether I should be happy or sad for this news, but SeaWorld in California is cutting down or canceling their killer whale show. Of course, this is a big win for animal rights activists and a big blow to the park, right?
Definitely a big blow to the park. The show was made famous in the 1960s with the killer whale or orca Shamu. Now, there's been growing criticism, though, and calls to give the animals a more natural life.
Right, and that's what the park plans to do.
Exactly. It seems like that in 2017 it's apparently going to launch a more conservation-focused killer whale exhibit. So that means next year's the end of the famed Shamu shows. The move to tank the show came after the California Coastal Commission barred the park from breeding any killer whales in captivity. SeaWorld executives haven't given many details about how the new show will be different. It's going to be focused at least more on a natural setting. It's also unclear whether the same changes would be undertaken at the company's two other aquatic theme parks in Orlando, Florida and San Antonio, Texas.
Well, the original Shamu died in the 1970s after 6 years of captivity, but the name lived on.
It did. And even in the 1990s, they were still using that name, and I caught one of those shows when I was a younger lad in Florida, where the park is still going to have the shows, at least for the time being.
Right. Well, we look forward to a new show there, and I look forward to how that would be changed with this new plan.
It'll be interesting to see what happens.
All right. Thank you, Bruce. I'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Conn-young.
Time magazine predicted that sharing economy would change the world back in 2011. 4 years later, there is Uber, Airbnb, and Zipcar, so yes, it may be safe to say that Time was right. But not only in the U.S., sharing economy is also a trend that's been spreading throughout Seoul. Simply by a touch of a button, you can now share rooms, cars, clothes, and even parking space. Our Oh Soo-young tells us more.
Sharing economy was first introduced in 1984 through a dissertation in the United States. 30 years later, it is on its way to becoming a brand new economic model as it integrates with IT and modern technology.
Sharing economy serves as a platform for sharing extra commodities with others online or through their smartphones.
In recent years, sharing economy in Korea has been making its way into our daily lives in various forms. This sharing culture has been flourishing in Seoul, which was even labelled by Forbes magazine as one of the world's sharing capitals in 2014.
Korea's cultural, social and work-related norms contribute to the sharing boom. Combined with information and communications technology, we can see Korea's own exquisite model of sharing economy take shape.
This is a place in eastern Seoul, where sharing economy is taking its course in form of the redistribution market system, which reuses pre-owned goods. There are hundreds of donated suits, ties and shoes laid out for you to pick and choose from, just like your personal wardrobe.
complete with a pair of heels, you can borrow an entire outfit for less than $27, and that's for 4 days. This way, clothes that were left in the back of someone's wardrobe are now on the racks to be worn by countless others for any special occasion, from weddings to job interviews.
I came to borrow a suit for an interview for graduate school.
I suddenly got a job interview and I couldn't buy a suit right away, so I came to borrow one instead.
Buying a suit for the first time can be expensive and stressful when you don't know where to start looking and what's right for you. We provide a low-cost solution for these concerns.
Finding somewhere to park is a daily challenge in the big city. But a smartphone application solves this headache by allowing users to share their personal parking spots in a product service system where consumers pay to have access to a product. As IT and sharing economy come together, parking in the city becomes a new hassle-free experience.
Users can register their parking spots on our app while they are not using them and earn their parking fees paid by those who use the space.
Drivers can use the application to find the closest and cheapest parking spot in the vicinity.
안내를 시작하겠습니다.
On this application, you can select the area you're heading to. That gives you information on the parking spaces being shared. And if you press the navigation button, you can even get assisted guidance to the exact location. It only costs $1 an hour to use the parking spot. That's much cheaper than other parking lots or garages nearby, which charge up to $7 per hour. Also, users can redeem almost half the parking fee as cash points for later use.
Parking is an everyday discomfort for all drivers, so I thought that developing a service to resolve such problems would be a good business opportunity.
Sharing objects, places, skills, and even experience can generate access to entirely new spaces or resources beyond imagination.
As our lives become more connected with IT, smartphones, IoT, and various commodities, sharing economy services will become more actively used.
As with the e-commerce trend that people never believed would work when it was first introduced, sharing economy has its own critics nipping at the bit, as it still finds its footing. But rest assured, in this tech-heavy era, economists agree it's only a matter of time. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
As Bruce mentioned earlier, China's smog reached record levels, which means the Korean peninsula will not be smog-free either. Well, should we have a mask handy for tomorrow? Let's go over to our Ji-han. Ji-han, are we going to need a mask?
Nope, we won't need a mask tomorrow. Now, westerly winds trigger smog from China, but for tomorrow, easterly winds will blow in, helping to push away and clear up air quality.
That's good to hear. Now, this Thursday is a big day for high school students here in Korea, as it is the 2016 National College Entrance Exam Day. Right. What's the weather going to be like?
Well, thankfully, we're going to have a good weather over the next 2 days. Now, first of all, tomorrow is an orientation day for the exam, so students will be dropping by designated test sites to check where they'll be taking their tests. And as we can see, temperatures will remain above the seasonal averages on the orientation day and on the exam day, but morning lows will kick off in the single digits, so be sure to layer up on your way out in the morning. And skywise, some parts in Gangwon-do province and Jeju will see spotty rain during the morning hours, but the rest of the peninsula will have mostly sunny skies. So I hope many of you get to make the most of the pleasant autumn weather tomorrow, as daily highs will also be warmer. And here in the capital, the afternoon highs will hike up to 16. Daegu and Busan will hike up to 18 and 19 for Gwangju. And as for the other regions, Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 17, while Dokdo rises to 11. Now, it's forecast to be a foggy morning for the inland region, so be sure to drive with caution. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that is our broadcast on this Tuesday evening. I'm Moon Conn-young. Thank you always for watching. We hope to see you right back here at the same time tomorrow on NewsCenter.